Here.
Ms. Laura Pateki.
Here.
Ms. Dana Andres.
Here.
Ms. Stacy Hover.
Here.
Mr. James Preston.
Here.
All present.
Here. Okay. So routine matters. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the regular Board of Ed meeting dated December 20th. Mark and Stacy, all in favor? Aye. Communication, so we do have an annual meeting in April for Questar 3, correct, Bill?
Yep.
Okay. And that typically happens there, right?
We will follow up and get everybody's RSVP because they'll want to know how many of us are coming.
Okay. Any Board of Ed items? Consideration for agenda? Consent action? No? Okay. So we'll move on to reports. Assembly member John McDonald is with us tonight. We didn't see him come in. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you for joining us. We love to see you every year and hear from you. We especially would like to thank you for the extra $200,000 that you were able to secure for the school district. We will say that Joe and I talked, we you know, when Megan and he went to you, we were hoping for something. We weren't hoping that large, I guess. What would you say? We're thankful and grateful for that much.
When it's effective.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you, and to the board members, first of all, thank you for your service. I know it's sometimes not that easy, and same token, we sometimes don't make it easy at the state level, to be honest with you, and that's why Joe, Megan, and other members of the administration have headaches too, but as usual with the budget, I usually try to make the rounds a little bit, make sure that there's the opportunity for dialogue, even though really a lot of dialogue goes on all year long with Joe and Megan. We communicate on a regular basis. And we were very fortunate last year. Rensselaer was probably, from my perspective, when I look at last year, was like the best it's ever going to get, to be honest with you, in regards to foundation aid and fully funding it. And same token, they did a good job of demonstrating that they were still falling short. And we were very fortunate the speaker gets it. So for districts that are high need, and we were able to demonstrate it, we were able to secure additional $200,000. And so I told Joe, that doesn't come every year. So just, doesn't mean we won't try, but it doesn't come every year. As you know, the budget was released yesterday by the governor. I think she's set a pretty difficult tone. Peter and I were just talking about this. The days of wine and roses are over. I will say out of the 13 districts I represent, Rensselaer is probably in a little bit better position than most. It's only just under a 3% increase in your operating or foundation aid. And that's really right now, but we've already just got the total, the education runs to get a sense of where things are at, but we'll be digging a little bit deeper into the process as we go through. I have districts that are losing 14, 15%, and I dread those meetings, to be honest with you. However, as I always say, this is the start. It normally doesn't get worse than this. It usually can only get better. As you know, education remains a high priority of the Assembly. It's something we constantly are fighting for annually on a regular basis. And, overall, we've made progress over the years. Sometimes it's not noticeable because I know as you as board members, the administration, parents, there's never enough for your kids. There never is. However, at the same token, we're spending a lot of money. We're over $30 billion is what's being projected this year, which is only second to health, which is an ungodly amount of money. I'm not even going to get into it at this stage of the game. Interestingly enough, though, we're seeing health start to overlap a little bit, particularly when it comes to mental health. That is a priority of the governor's. She's laid out a plan to provide hopefully more resources that can actually be brought into the schools out of our health budget versus being something that comes out of your education budget. So that's a work in progress. For some districts it works well, some districts it doesn't. But fine. I'm sorry. I'm not standing by the door because I'm leaving. I didn't know where to stand, so I just thought I'd stand here.
Right on the table.
Right on the table. No. So right now, I know that there's the usual annual BOCES-wide or Questar BOCES-wide requests, particularly when it comes to CTE salaries and things like that. We obviously are going to support that. Some more procedural things that we're trying to work through, but at the end of the day, the most important thing you need to know is what are the numbers we're going to be able to work with and put forward the budget for the voters to consider. will just guarantee you that we're early getting to you. Usually it's later in February or March, but the way the schedules are working out is why we're here, but I'll stay in constant communication with the administration. But before I leave, if there's any questions or thoughts, I'm happy to entertain them from the board or anybody else.
Thank you for everything you do.
You're welcome, thank you. Still more to be done.
Hard work.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Take
you,
it
John.
easy. Good night.
Appreciate you. Take care.
And as we get closer, obviously, Megan, you'll have more numbers for us and stuff come budget season, right?
Yes, I have preliminary numbers for you right now. It doesn't include revenue, it's more on the expense side. We'll start getting into the details and the nitty-gritty next month and even more so in March. Because obviously the governor's budget's not the final budget, so.
Do you want to
Like
go,
you said,
Megan?
there's a-
You can go, Megan, if you want with your part, and we'll go back to Ryan if you want.
Sure.
Since John just went, yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, sure, since we're already talking about
Yeah.
budget. So I put in front of all of you a copy of the board report that was attached to my monthly board report. This is the rollover budget. So annually, you see what we call the rollover budget, which is simply just rolling over salaries. So everything else, all the other expense lines, aside from what I know, which is generally benefits, stays the same. So this would incorporate our contractual increases, and for those contracts that are either up or employees that don't fall under a contract, that is set every single year. There's a average over 3 years that's taken, and then we consider CPI, consumer price index, and inflation. So I'm not gonna go line by line through this, I'm just gonna hit the highlights, and if you have any questions, feel free to stop me. Some things to take note. There is, if you look under central services and then you see the 1600 codes, the first one there is 1620 operational plant. That salary increase is really quite minimal, you'll notice, on $1 million. That's because we actually are down a part-time cleaner. And we're not anticipating replacing that at this point, but that's why that number looks so small on $1 million budget number. 1621, that is more reflective of the CSEA contractual salary increases that you see there. So that's more representative of a standard salary increase year over year. If you follow on down to administration and improvement category, 2020 supervision, it's called regular school. That difference year over year from 23-24 to 24-25 is $42,000. There is a salary put in there that is currently under the American Rescue Plan funding. That is a common theme that you're going to hear throughout this entire budget process, because if you recall from conversations last year, we're hitting a fiscal cliff September 30th, 2024. So any salaries that are currently in the American Rescue Plan have to be considered and potentially put into the general fund. So there is one salary in that particular code, which is why that increase is a little bit more substantial, to the tune of like 8%. Continuing along with that theme, if you go to teaching, 2110, teaching regular school, that's the bulk of our salaries in there for teachers. It's the bulk of our budget, period. That increase is minimal. It's 3%. It's a nominal increase, but it does incorporate a conservative estimate for our RTA, Rensselaer Teachers Association increases, because that contract is up at the end of June 30, 2024, so we will be working on negotiations. So that falls in line with what I was saying about averaging increases and then taking in consideration CPI and inflation, but it's not a hard and fast number because negotiations are not. They haven't even begun essentially, so we don't have a solid number on that yet. The other piece is that does take into consideration any salaries that were incorporated last fiscal year from the American Rescue Plan. So that already covers any FTEs that were put into the general fund in 23-24 during that budget development process. 2250, that's also a significant portion of our budget, our overall budget. That's the program for students with disabilities. And that $181,000 difference reflects a 3.3% increase. As I noted in the December 31st budget status report, I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at that, but we have a significant budgetary increase in our non-instructional salaries, which is directly related to teacher aides. It's an increase of $160,000 this year. It's related to 3 full-time FTEs plus additional hours and schedules that have been, and the recent MOA schedules that were approved. So there's a significant increase in budgetarily there, and which is taken into consideration for 24-25. We have longer bus routes, we have bus aides, we have teacher aides reviewing or overseeing, supervising lunch and recess now. So it's definitely become a larger expense on the district this year.
Chill out!
A couple of the other items that I wanted to hit, there's 2815, you'll notice that health services, that was a replacement, that decreases by 1,743. That's because there was a replacement of a teacher that retired. So there was, a nurse that resigned. So the differential in salary has caused a decrease. And then the other thing I want to note, while the district transportation services budget overall doesn't have much over a 2% increase, there was a significant shift, as we've all been aware, from the contractual transportation budget line to the salaries, because Heather fortunately has been able to find bus drivers, so we have pulled our transportation service in-house 100%. We're no longer contracting out any of our routes, which is a complete 180 from last year.
Nice,
Congratulations
job.
And then their employee benefits, those have been updated based on what I know now. So for instance, the state retirement system, that rate increase is going up over 2%, which is very large in 1 year. That's a big jump, which causes a 9.8% increase budgetarily for us. That's that $54,000, if you're following across there on the employee benefits state retirement, that's the $54,000 increase. Plus, of course, it takes into consideration more staff, more FTEs, and the overall rates increasing. Similarly, teachers' retirement, that percentage rate increase is going from 9.76 to 10.25. So while the percent increase year over year is not significant, the fact that we're putting a lot more salaries into the budget is having an impact. Workers' compensation, I'm pleased to report that we're having better claims experience and we're closing out claims, so we're not seeing any real change in that. That's a $600 difference from 1 year to the next, which is minimal. Unemployment is staying stable, as is disability insurance. And then health insurance, which is the hospital medical dental, so that covers our health and prescription benefits. That's right now at about between a 10 and a 12% increase based on very rudimentary numbers. I'll have more information in February that are closer to what the actual increases will be for MVP, Highmark, CVS. And of course, that'll be part of my report out in March when we get the final numbers. So that's a conservative estimate, I would say, but it's also about where industry standard is. It's an extremely expensive portion of our budget. And the debt service for this particular building, the principal and interest we pay, that's actual. So that $4.8 million that you see there is actual. And then the interfund transfers will remain the same from 23-24 to 24-25 at this juncture anyway. And that presents a 4.5% increase just for salaries for 23-24 over 24-25. And of course, taking into consideration the employee benefit that I am aware of at this point.
I don't think more people is a bad thing.
No, it's absolutely
Staffed is
not. To
nice.
have the programming and the FTEs and the staffing,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of what the budget can support.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're absolutely welcome. Any questions?
Thanks, Megan.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Megan.
And that's it for me, Jen. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Brian, are you going to be representing the athletics department?
I am
tonight?
today.
Okay.
So we're right in the middle of winter sports. If you notice, winter weather has appeared, so leading to rescheduling, but we're up to the challenge of getting every game played. Want to thank transportation again. There's a lot of districts struggling to get teams on time, two games at all. We don't have that problem, so thank you.
Knock on wood.
Knock on wood. Senior athletes had their pictures taken for their senior banners. They should be here by the end of the month. Spring sports signups will begin soon. As soon as we have the date, we will release it. And reminder to people attending games and matches, anyone 8th grade or below needs an adult that will support them. Doesn't have to be a parent, but will vouch for them if they're not behaving. And we are noticing across the state and section unruly behavior amongst fans, players. So it's a reminder that spectators are to show good sportsmanship, respect the rules of school, either here or on the road. We're not going to tolerate it here, definitely, but we're also not going to send athletes that can't behave. So it's not just here; it's coming down from Section 2. It's coming across the state. But just a reminder to everybody. And other than that, I'm all set.
All right, Ryan. Thank you so much. Mr. Palmer.
Yeah, I want to kind of piggyback a little bit and thank Heather, yesterday, my kids got home about 45 minutes late. All the buses delayed. We have not had that here. Maybe every now and then a bus has to wait, a group of kids have to wait like 5
They got
minutes. So really appreciate that, and I don't think other schools are experiencing that success, so thank you, Heather. In school during this month, obviously we're back in, we're kind of wrapping up the first half of the school year. Hard to believe the second quarter ends in a couple weeks. But at this point, the kids are taking a lot of mid-year assessments. We need that data. We need to see growth from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year, kind of drive instruction with that. So you might be hearing a little bit, about iReady testing, reading and math, and then with our phonics program, we have really great reading for some of our students. They'll be taking that. And then in grades 3 through 5 this month, they also kind of take the practice simulation for the computer-based test and reading in ELA and math as well, which is really only about 45 minutes, and you don't get data from it, but the kids are exposed to it. They learn how to utilize the program and the tools that are there within the computer-based testing. So you might hear a little bit about that. I think grades 3 through 5 tomorrow, they'll do the math one. And then I think maybe the 23rd, they'll do the ELA. So kind of helps prepare them. They've been preparing all year a little bit for it, but it's the actual simulations that they'll take. I know Joe shared on my behalf last month a little bit of a similar report, but I just wanted to touch on it a little bit, and I shared at the PTA meeting. From my perspective, I thought the month of December, looking across the board, faculty and staff and the students, I've never seen more smiles and a more positive school culture than I think we saw last month. Maybe ever, but certainly pre-COVID for sure, and a very long time. And I think the folks at the PTA meeting and maybe even in this room maybe experienced the same thing. Just across the board, with the PTA putting on, I think, a real quality holiday shopping experience for the kids, which means a lot to them, and I still get those gifts myself, at Christmas. My kids are happy to have that. So maybe not a huge thing, but huge for kids. So the PTA did that. To our winter concert, which I was ill that night, unfortunately, but I did get to see the recording of it. Mr. Hosley and the boys and girls deserve a lot of credit. And as I said at the PTA meeting, folks might not know this, but for our 4th graders, many of them don't start playing the instrument until September. So for them to perform just a few months later, most schools are not putting out a band in the middle of the school year. So I think it's incredible that he does that and the kids get that opportunity. Even looking at, more the beginning of the month, our cafeteria staff, I think the kids came back on Monday, December 4th, creating Whoville, in the hallway and the cafeteria. To see the kids' faces, it was amazing, and even had staff members come down based on their kids going up and talking about, they had to come down and actually see it for themselves. You know, so for them to give up Friday night and a weekend to do that, you know, is amazing, in my opinion. Even looking at our character ed assemblies, you know, where we don't normally have performances, but in this particular one we did. And to have over 200 people attend those performances, I mean, is nothing short of amazing. When you're looking at roughly 500 kids in the elementary and over 200 people coming. You know, to our Spirit Week, which, you know, thank Mrs. Hurley for the idea. It's nice to do it. The kids love doing it. To our door decorating contest that Mrs. Lane and I think Mrs. Kyer proposed. Almost every teacher did something for that. It just created a school culture that I'm not sure that we've had in a long time, and maybe COVID had something to do with that. And then even our primary classrooms were visited by Santa and the Magical Express, which, you know, I thank Megan, you know, for that. The kids' faces, it was amazing, and even staff members coming up to me that have been here a really long time to say that's probably the coolest thing we've had in a really long time. So I wanted to make sure, it's hard to capture that in a report or an email. I wanted you to know that that's what December was, at least for me. And I think for, you know, certainly many of our faculty, staff, and students. So really cool month. I think the momentum has continued into January. It's hard to recreate December. We get it, it's a little bit different. But I think it was pretty awesome here in school. So I wanted to make sure I shared that with you guys.
I love hearing you say that because I don't care what environment to walk into for everybody. Thank you for doing that.
Can I just add something to that too? We have actually seen a huge improvement in behavior on the buses from December right on. Like a lot less student write-ups, a lot more supporting each other versus fighting against each
Well,
other.
because
too.
happy students don't fight as much.
Yeah. It's carried
That's great.
right down
That's
through.
great. It's good to hear that.
Good.
Thank you, Jeff. So our high school report out would be Mr. Pignella and Mr. Martinelli. I think the
Yeah.
both of you, or one of you?
No, both of us, Bob can go first.
Okay.
We're going to talk a little bit about attendance. Year-to-date attendance is pretty stable from this year to last year, around 90%. December attendance is up from 87.5 this year. We had around 83 last year, so good news there. Fall sweeps. I don't know if you heard what we've been doing in the high school. It's not, we've been coaching our students to be productive members of society. We want them to get, one of the items that Don laid out at the beginning of the year administratively is increased instructional time. So how do we do that? We have to have our students arrive to class on time. So we decided to start that probably
Last month.
last month, and it's been growing. Less students are being written up to be late. They know that they have to have an urgency to get to class, and it's showing some success. So we're really pleased with that. We're hoping it becomes part of what we do, basically a hall sweep. We ask our teachers to lock the doors. Anyone who's late, they are sent to me, and they are given an immediate detention. The students know we're serious about it, and basically we are coaching them to get to class on time. It's an important part of being a productive member of society, being on time. So we're seeing some success with that.
Are you seeing lack of repeat offenders with that?
No,
No.
oddly enough. It's a strict, it's a, you know, not repeat offenders. And they're not our high flyers either. And they're not our behavioral kids that you would think. There are kids that just don't have an urgency to get to class. And that part of their lives will be coming up soon, post-graduation, getting a job and maintaining that job and getting to that employment on time, so.
Is there any child that's saying to you, like, they have certain barriers, like my locker was too far away, I
Yeah.
couldn't get my books in time?
We hear everything, but the goal is not to write detentions and referrals, believe me. I don't want to be trapped in my office writing constant referrals. It's not a gotcha system, and I'll hear excuses. If there's a medical excuse, we have some other students that are helping some medical students get from class to class. And just, you know, I had one student today, the bag broke on the way, and our books spilled out. Naturally, we're not gonna write that student up. with those traditionally late students. And we announced the first few, and word got out. Now we're doing it purely confidential. I'm just putting out an email, and I'm hoping we could start doing that more and more after our Easter or spring vacation.
Maybe move a couple lockers, I don't know, that'll be
Yeah.
up to you.
We can help you overcome those barriers. Let's see what we can do.
I don't know, maybe, take
They
these
only
two
go
classes
up.
of books at the same time.
There's that.
Problem solve.
All right, so my first bullet is actually Ms. Cavell, which it works out well because she's the RTA representative here tonight. So Ms. Cavell had a guest speaker in last week, right? So from the Jewish Heritage Living Memorial to the Holocaust. So met right in here. Erwin Forley was the speaker. Had her seniors in here, humanitarian crisis class also. Ms. Rasco brought in her U.S. history. Place was packed. Presenter did a great job. Joe and I got to sit in. I got to tell you, the kids were attentive, behaved, glued to the screen. I mean, it was really pretty impressive. So I really want to thank Caitlin for making that happen. And you know, I feel like it was a great experience for the kids. I know you said they had a lot of, you know, conversation afterwards in the class and stuff. You could see like the points that he was making were really hitting home with the kids and whatnot. So that was a great thing. We do have our January regions coming up. I did mention it before. For grades 6, 7, and 8 next week, there will not be any change, so they'll be in session all 5 days. For our high school, they're in session on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. On Tuesday, they only come in if they are sitting for the ELA exam or living environment. And on Friday, we don't have any high school students in. It's a rating day for the regions where the teachers will all grade them. So 6 through 8, normal for the whole week, everybody in attendance. For the high school, on Tuesday, they're only in if they have an exam, and on Friday, grades 9 through 12 are not in. Last thing I have is we have one retiree this year, okay? So Mr. Preston's retiring
We have to
this
agree,
year.
right?
What's that? Not this
Hey.
Mr. Preston.
He's staying.
So, 27 plus years, spent his whole career here in Rensselaer. There's probably been a Preston here for the last 100 years, with Dad here before that. So, coached everything, football, basketball, track and field, bowling, been a teacher, coach, and mentor to countless students here. Really gonna miss him. We have convinced him to come back in and sub a little bit, so we might still see him a little.
We were talking about whether or not we were gonna accept the resignation.
Yes. But no, just a great guy, great Rensselaer guy, and, you know, we'll have him back in whenever we can and really gonna miss him. So, Coach Preston. That's what I got.
Appreciate it.
I just want to piggyback on the guest speaker. So when you're dealing with a classroom of high school students, the attention span is not what it used to be. When we sat, and I was sitting right here watching, and this is a person speaking on a screen, not even live in the room. He was speaking on a screen. And when you look up here, every single one of the high school students was glued and hanging on his words. They weren't looking at their phones, they weren't looking down, they weren't whispering with each other, they were glued and hanging on his words. It was an awesome opportunity that you set up. Students aren't gonna be that engaged reading out of any book, no matter how good it is. But when you're hearing from a person who lived through a piece of history like that, it was just amazing watching how interested the students were.
Did you record it?
It was recorded. Do you have access to the recording? Okay, because I looked up and I was wondering, I saw the recording, I was wondering who
Yeah,
had
I asked
that.
for
So
it. I
you
do
have
have
it?
it, yeah.
Okay. Very cool. I just wanted to just chime in. I was so glad I managed to get over here when that was scheduled and got to see that, because it was just, I wish we could provide learning experiences for our students like that
Mhm.
on a daily basis.
Is that something we could share? You could share?
Yeah, I
Send
can
that?
share it with you guys, yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so PPS, Amy's throwing me off because she's sitting on the left-hand side of the room for some reason this evening. So, Amy, it's all you.
Right, I was trying to make it, you know.
Accessible, okay.
We're all creatures of habit, aren't we? All right, well, so, this is my month to give you the special ed presentation, but I'm sharing it with, Jan Zadori and Project Aware. So this is gonna be a little bit of a shorter version, but just an opportunity to provide you all with some updates about the special education department. So do you wanna, there, what's happening? Okay, we'll just scroll, that's all right. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the highlights and good things that are happening, some of the challenges. I'll give you a little bit of data, facts, and figures, and then we'll talk about goals for the future. In terms of some of the highlights, people might be getting really bored of hearing about really great reading, but I'm going to keep talking about it because it's really one of the things that I think when I look at the kind of last couple of years, this is something that I feel like is pretty profound, even though it's still at its early stages in terms of the impact that it can have for our students. So just those of you that need a little reminder, we have our regular ELA curriculum. The really great reading program didn't supplant that. It's an additional piece. And one of the things that if you're in the field of education you hear about a lot right now is the science of reading, how much people are looking at the years and years of research that we have about how kids learn to read best, and really identified that we kind of strayed away from some of the most important practices that build those early literacy skills, which have to do with phonics, have to do with really building a strong foundation in those skills. And the really great reading program is really about that. It's about making sure that our kids move through their elementary experience with us filling those gaps and not letting them grow bigger, where it becomes much more difficult as an older student to have that fluent kind of reading that allows you to really comprehend what you're reading. So this year, Jeff and I have really collaborated at a higher level to have a little bit more oversight and hands-on and get more resources for our teachers in order to take the program and not just implement it, but really now drill down a little bit and look at how are our students' performance data informing what we're doing with them in the classroom, making sure that when we're grouping kids for interventions, it's thoughtful and it's targeted to really knowing what are the skills that we're trying to build with them. So it's a tool that I feel like we're just kind of almost still taking off with. But this year we took some really big strides, and I'm really proud of the work that we've done. I think teachers are feeling much more comfortable this year, certainly than last year. Jeff and I have talked about kind of how we're seeing people using it much more easily this year than they had in the past. So I still want to say that's a big highlight. The other thing I really, I have to say has been a shift here is the way that we're using what's called an instructional support team. That's the IST is our acronym for that. And I give a lot of credit to Maggie Barber. She's our elementary school psychologist who's been really pivotal, I think, at the elementary level, working with Jeff and collaborating around this process. Again, big words in the field of education, that MTSS model, the multi-tiered system of supports, where we're tasked with really making sure we look at our ground level, our basic level supports for students in our core educational programming. We do good screening, we look at our assessment data like the iReady that Jeff was talking about. And then when we see those kids that are at high risk, we're putting them in appropriate interventions. And that goes not just for academic concerns, but the emotional behavioral concerns as well. And that process takes time. It takes a lot of time to build in terms of how we're scheduling regular meetings, we're getting the right people at the table to problem solve and really come up with individualized plans to address where those needs are. And that's something that, it can get a bad rap. Sometimes people feel like it's too long, or I'm afraid this is just gonna spin us and cycle us and we're never gonna get anywhere. And that's where I really wanna say, I think the process now, I think people understand, and I think Jeff would agree, we are moving on it. When we're putting those plans in place, it's not one and done, we talked about great ideas and then we forgot about it. We have regular cycles of reviewing those kids, and we've actually had a fair number of students that have moved through the CSD process as a result of that. Not that that's the end goal, but that process is working as it should, and that's taken some time to kind of get to that point where I think we have the level of buy-in and people knowing how to use that system well to meet the needs of students, and I'm really proud of that. And similarly, more of our alphabet soup in special ed. FBA stands for Functional Behavioral Assessments, and BIPs are Behavior Intervention Plans. So a functional behavioral assessment is part of special ed requirements. It's part of the regulations of when we have students that have some repetitive behavioral needs, they get in the way of their learning or ability to function in their setting. We are required to do this analysis where we take a very deep dive. We gather a lot of data. Teachers have a role to play. All of our PPS staff have roles to play. It's an endeavor. And when I came to this district, there was not one kid in the district that had a behavior intervention plan. So it's been a learning curve to get people kind of on the page of saying, this is actually something that we should be doing, that we need to do. It does take time. It is a process. And when we develop those behavior plans based on that analysis, we have to keep monitoring then those plans and make sure that kids are progressing. It's not perfect, but that is something that we have moved the needle on, and I feel really good about that. Again, it's not perfect, but it's something that we need to do, and I think people are just starting to kind of understand that we at the CSE level don't just make decisions about moving kids in different placements until we've done our due diligence in these processes. So I say that as a real win and kind of movement in the right direction. And some of that, kind of getting to the third highlight, where I'm really working, with some good teams of people to build more of that support for our special ed teachers to be able to be the leaders in those classrooms to help guide those instructional practices. Again, so much more work to be done, but things that I've talked about before here, having Dr. Pepper come in and kind of consult with teams and talk about doing some things differently and being aware that sometimes the way that we've done things here that's not where it ends. There are other things that we can try and we need to try, and I think those are some things that I would say are moving in the right direction. Any questions? Yeah.
In terms of the FBA behavioral plan assessments, of the students that you said you had 0 students with them.
And I can't speak from before. I can just say when I came,
So there were none.
Correct.
So, yeah, I mean, how
I'm
many
appalled by
students
that.
could have been helped by having that in place, right?
Well, again, that's a
So
hypothetical, but
hypothetical.
I do think people were, I don't want to say that people weren't doing things, but they weren't using that
formal
process.
Okay.
Right,
So-
that was not part of the normal operation.
Of the students that are potentially identified as needing to go through that process, what's a percentage-wise that are now on some sort of behavior improvement plan or have gone through that process?
I don't know.
Is there like a backlog, I guess, is on your end, or are you working through that and you now feel like all of those
No,
students
there's
are
not a
being addressed?
backlog. I think as we meet with, whether it's a parent that's bringing to our attention, or we're looking at our behavior data and saying, this child, let's say, is getting suspended rather frequently, or this is a behavioral concern that's teachers are bringing up, it's like really disruptive to the learning environment. When those are coming up, we are initiating the process. I will say, it's just like any other assessment with a student. You have to get parent permission.
Right.
We don't just jump into it and do it. It's something that requires, participation at larger levels, and sometimes there's discussions around that. But, I do want to be clear. I don't want to paint I'm sure people were doing, behavioral supports, but it wasn't in the kind of formalized process that, really we're required to do. And it does allow us to get a more objective look at student behavior than just people's subjective things are really bad or things are really hard. You have data to say this is where it's hard. These are the kinds of things that typically trigger that kind of a response from the student. What can we learn about that? How can we develop a plan that's targeting what those, triggers or trouble spots are, what are the functions of the behavior serving for the student. So again, it's a whole frame of thinking about how we're addressing student needs that we should be doing.
Right.
So
And like the IST process, is that also feeding some students into the, like an IEP program that may not have been previously under CSE?
So I would say, when that system functions well, what I think is happening more often is that we're getting the right kids to that point. Not just, there's a lot of kids that struggle for a lot of different reasons. Some of which is because maybe they're having some gaps in their, learning, and that's part of the reason that it's actually mandated that we're using this, it's called response to intervention process that's kind of tied in with IST, where we're trying to make sure we've put some good instructional practices in place to make sure we've ruled out, this isn't just something that we didn't have the right instruction and the student could have, benefited and moved on, and now all of a sudden we're calling them learning disabled. Like, that's actually where that kind of came from. So, I would say we're moving very, very in a really positive direction with that now. But it's a growing process in terms of people understanding that those things don't happen quickly. It's a iterations of reviewing how kids are doing and coming back to the table and making some different plans. And I think that's something that we're growing in that area. So
Can I just interject real quick with regards to that?
Yeah.
Having the extra folks in PPS that we've added over the last few years is instrumental in both of those things, both processes at this point. Like having Mr. Cooley as a social worker, Mary Fran as another psychologist, Maggie Barber, who I will give credit to, really has taken over probably a bit of both, but definitely the instructional support team, and is now working with Chris Johnson, who's another resource we've added. If you rewind a number of years ago, we didn't have these resources. We were stretched so thin. It was very challenging to kind of do some of those things. So it's important to know that having those people up in pupil personnel services is a big part of this, and a huge part, to be honest with you, of supporting the elementary building across the board. It is like night and day as to what it was, say 5 or so years ago, to what it is now in terms of how we can support students. So I just kind of wanted to make sure.
absolutely, and it is that prevention model, because Maggie Barber, she's a school psychologist, and typically you think they're working primarily with students that are already identified. She's spending a large amount of time with not identified students, working with teams of teachers to come up with strategies and ways of supporting them. So, he's right, that takes a lot of time for her outside of what might be a traditional role of just working in the special ed, kids that are already identified realm. So, challenges, I didn't really change these slides from last year, if you remember, because honestly, these are a lot of the same challenges that we're facing right now. The regional special ed service shortage is still there, and it's still a problem. Certainly didn't help that St. Rose just closed their program, so that those are less special ed teachers coming in the field. But where we kind of take the hit there, it's certainly our preschool programming. We're still not able to service all of the students preschool-wise that should be getting services. Those services are very limited right now. Out-of-district programming for students is very limited when we're trying to refer kids out. And it has to do with those programs not being able to staff them. Even internally, we've had conversations about wanting to, possibly, I would love to open some other classrooms here, but we literally can't staff them. And that's where you get, it's really, the staffing shortage is really kind of impacting the other, I think, really great stuff that we could be doing even internally. It's just that we don't have enough people that are coming out of these programs ready to teach in those kind of classrooms. So that is still a challenge. That is not new. The issues in terms of our day-to-day kind of having to cover for teachers that are out. I don't think we're out of the woods yet with that, and we do still have, concerns about kids getting their services when we're having to kind of move staff around because we don't have, the level of substitutes available to do that. That's an unfortunate reality that we're still facing this year. I don't think I need to kind of bang the drum louder about student mental health and behavioral health, and I'm going to be quiet very soon and let Jan share a lot of really good stuff that we're doing through Project Aware, but we are still in a situation where we have a lot of student needs that we're trying to address. again, in positive, preventive, and proactive ways that are taking, you know, it takes a lot of different resources and ideas about how we can do that. And, you know, within our special ed department in particular, I'm looking very carefully at our attendance and our suspensions and graduation rates. And I want to see that data trending in a more positive direction, and we're not there yet. That's something that is a challenge that, you know, I think, again, our process is much more robust than when I first came. We have a great system in place. Mr. Pitnell and Jay, like, we're at the table looking at those kids and saying, what other resources do we need to allocate here? But we're not where we want to be with those things. There's some new regulations, special ed wise, that you'll be hearing about soon, and in terms of how we're, you know, again, being asked, you need to keep kids in school. You can't be suspending our students with disabilities in particular out of school and causing them to miss that instructional time. But we have needs there, and so those are things that we're going to continue to work on together. But those are the challenges, again, not new, but things that I think we do have some good plans to address. As far as the facts and figures section, it's really not, the profile hasn't kind of changed, numbers slightly, but not dramatically. You can still see the majority of our special ed budget is being spent on those out-of-district programs as before. And not for lack of wanting to do more, you know, internally, but like I said, that requires staffing a lot of kind of intensive programs if you're pulling those kids back to district, and we haven't been able to do that to the degree we'd like to yet. But not a whole lot, like I said, changed in terms of that overall profile. Looking at, like, from last year to this year, the blue columns are last year, red is this year. In terms of the placement of our students, this column, this is really where we want to be, where we have 80% or more of the time students are in their gen ed settings where they're getting their services pushed in by a direct consultant teacher. That is still where the majority of our kids are getting their services. Kids in this realm are getting between 40 and 79% of their time in gen ed. Students here are getting less than 40% of their time in a gen ed setting, so those would be our self-contained. And then these are our out-of-district students that are in out-of-district programs. Obviously, we'd like to see this way lower. That's one of the challenges that we're talking about. But I am happy to see that this is a better trend than it was, you know, initially when I came here. I think we have more kids that are getting services in the direct consult model. But again, not dramatically different from last year. As far as our preschool kiddos, the blue columns are our kids that they're in preschool now, but they're gonna be transitioning into kindergarten next year. Just at a quick snapshot, we've got 12 kids that would be coming into kindergarten. One of the things that we had to do this year was to divide our kindergarten students into 2 direct consult classrooms instead of 1. It is not tenable to have 12 higher needs special ed students in one classroom. We need to put them in 2. So our special ed teacher, Kristen Darby, has been going between both. I actually just met with her again today, and she's doing a great job, and I think that model has been working. And it's looking to me like we're probably headed in that direction again next year with our numbers. We don't have too many that are out in special class right now that are going to be transitioning in, but as you can see, in the following year, that's a large number. So these are all things that are kind of in our mind for planning. Some kids just get related services only, and we've got some in the hopper waiting for their meetings. So that's just a quick snapshot at that. Our special ed teachers and aides, knock on wood, I don't think anybody's retiring, and I don't think anyone's moving. Shh, don't say anything.
Why'd you say that out loud?
I'm hoping that this looks the same next time we talk. I am hoping to continue to contract with Access Therapy for our teacher out at Doane Stewart, because that's been working out really well. She's been a great fit, and it took a long time to get that in place. So I think we're going to continue with that for next year, but really not looking at a remarkably different profile of adult services necessarily. I will say again, in terms of our delivery model, we do have some grade levels where we have a lot of students that we are going to have to continue to think about. There may be other grade levels where we have to divide our special ed students between 2 sections instead of all being in one. But that would be with the same special ed teacher going between. So those are thoughts. We're keeping an eye on our numbers. Related service providers, that all is looking primarily the same. I didn't add in our Project Aware people because they're not doing direct service with students, but we do have a few more Aware staff that we'll be introducing in just a minute. But that's largely looking the same. And last, I just wanted to talk about just, if I kind of nailed it down at a very basic level, the big goals that we're going to be continuing to focus on rest of this year and for next year, really looking at kind of continuing to build those supports for students with emotional and behavioral needs. We've been rolling around some good ideas in terms of how we're integrating some new things from Project Aware that I'm going to let Jan talk about in just a minute. I really want to focus with our special ed teachers on getting a stronger sense of what kind of specially designed instruction we're folding into our models. So no matter where you're getting the service, whether it's in your resource room or in a self-contained or a direct consult class, how are special ed teachers really being able to tune into using the appropriate technology, the appropriate supports for teaching, filling gaps. This is an area that we're going to continue to build people's capacity in, because the stronger that system is, the more we can service kids across the board here in district and have them, make success toward graduation. And a lot of that is going to really be looking at how we're using our data more effectively. We have a lot more data now, but now it's like taking that and then matching it with how are we using that to really do something ultimately different and specialized for our students with disabilities. And I think kind of that combination is where some of our next steps are, and I think we've got some good ideas for how to move that forward, but that's kind of it. I gave you a very quick overview. I know Jan's got a lot to share, and I'm so excited for him to be able to give you kind of the next leg of the journey. So if there's any questions, I'll take them now, or I'll hand it off.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time, everybody.
Thanks.
You just gotta scroll down the mouse.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. It's a nice segue between Assemblymember McDonald talking about mental health in the governor's budget and the focus on mental health, and then Jeff talking about kids being happy in school. And it's really about a sense of belonging in schools that creates those bonds between teachers, where there's champions for students and there's trusted adults for students. So this is it all kind of, again, Amy talking about mental health and the importance of it. As Amy mentioned, I'm Jan Zadorian. I'm a 30-plus year veteran of education. I began my career in Schenectady as a counselor for at-risk students, a coach, a teacher, eventually principal for the alternative school in Schenectady. And then I moved to North County School District 20 years, where I know Ms. Cavell, who was a student teacher there. Very happy that she's here. And I left North County Public School at the time and moved to Northern Rivers, where I was director and principal of the Neil Hellman School, students with trauma and students that lived residentially that attended the school. So that is my background, and I'm thrilled to be part of the team here in Rensselaer, the school district, and also partnering with Lansingburg City School, Central School District this year for the Project Aware grant. So the Project Aware grant, Advancing Wellness and Resiliency in Education, is a 5-year grant, and as many of you know, it's the second of the 5-year cycle. Thanks to Amy, Heather Stazak, Joe, and everyone for their leadership in securing the grant for the next 5 years. This is our current staffing, myself as program director. Joe Otter is my counterpart in the Lansingburg Central School District. He oversees a great number of grants there, and he's been a tremendous partner as the entire Lansingburg Central School District has been. Chris Johnson, as just mentioned, he's our social media prevention educator, does digital awareness, also delivers some of our social emotional learning program to our students. Behavioral specialist was also mentioned, Mary Fran, a retired psychologist from Troy who's doing a tremendous job working with students grades K through 2 in a role where she's helping to support and coach teachers. We just hired 2 new hires, so I came aboard on, basically I started on November 2023, and Both Ryan Kelly and Susan Alvian, Ryan is our community project director, began on December 18th. And Ryan's role is shared between the two schools. He's going to be focusing on social emotional learning, student family engagement, which is critically important for our parents, and getting them engaged in the school, but also in support services in the community, also wellness for teachers. And then the mental health trainer, curriculum developer, shared between the both schools. One of the grant goals is to develop a youth resiliency toolkit. And it's really exciting to be part of that because Rensselaer and Lansingburg will be the foundational schools to develop this resource, which will not only be used here, but across school districts locally. And by the end of the grant, 2028, over 160 schools, it will be shared with over 160 schools, eventually be a resource for the New York State Education Department. And then the behavior support coach, we're interviewing for that position on Friday, and that will be a position at Lansingburg. So as I said, it's through SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, 5-year grant, approximately $6.6 million over the 5 years. And it's a rarity to get that kind of money, so we're really targeting this and looking at where we can best use these funds. 6 main components: evidence-based training, increasing on-site identification for students for screening, and then referring students and families to community agencies that can support them. Increasing outreach and engagement to the community and community services for our families. We're going to be looking at using a mental health screener. This is to identify concerns or considerations for students, and then from those screeners, provide targeted services for students, whether in the community or right here in school, in the school buildings or in Lansingburg. I mentioned the Youth Resiliency Toolkit. And lastly, by 2028, the goal is going to be a sustainable, replicable program where we're working on accessing resources when the grant goes away, that we can replace the resources through the grant. A lot of that could be finding other grants, or a lot of it's going to be teacher training so that our teachers become trainers of their colleagues. To give you an example of our community partners, it's an expansive list. Part of the grant requirement is that we have a community advisory council, and you can see, you may recognize many of the names and the agencies here, many of whom we're already contracting with, and they're providing services directly in the school or referring students to outside agencies. So our community partnerships to date through the Project Aware grant, we have the Start Children's Center. They're here in school 2.5 days a week. They're serving 18 families. The focus there is students with attendance issues. There's an attendance committee that meets and refers to the START program. The Pride Center, we're in talks right now. Last year, the Pride Center presented a kind of LGBTQ plus topics introductory to the staff. This year, they're going to be looking at targeting our middle school teachers, grades 6, 7, 8, for training. We're going to have a kickoff event on March 11th. We'll discuss that more with our internal team. And we're looking at potentially starting a student group, replicating what they're currently doing in Albany County, where students have a safe place to go on Friday nights. And they partner with I think they're partnering with the Boys and Girls Club on that. The Rensselaer County Department of Mental Health, we have a specialist, mental health specialist, working with 15 students. Again, this is happening in the school building, and the research will show you that the majority of services are, when provided in schools, are most successful. And that's when students can access them, because it's very hard for families to get their students to services in some cases due to transportation or other factors. St. Anne's Institute, we also have the Teen Intervene programs through Rensselaer County. They are currently doing the active parenting program. It started January 11th, 6 sessions through February 15th. And we're working with Ryan, our new hire community project manager, to get out and do some outreach with families to have more family participation with that program. St. Anne's, the board just approved the contract with St. Anne's. They've started their group counseling component. Tuesdays and Thursdays, they're here in the building. Today we met with a representative from St. Anne's. We had our first student referral to individual counseling. So out of the group counseling, we've done some assessments and screening. Students will receive individual counseling right here again at school. And we have a family peer advocate, Crystal Masonette, had 3 families, 4 students referred to her today. So we're beginning the initial stages of that outreach and getting students the needed services. And the beauty of it is that we're getting students services immediately. There's not a delay in wait because we have access to the services and contracts. Lansingburg has a student assistance counselor, several of them, and a prevention specialist. They implement some of their own programs. And what we're trying to do with this partnership with Lansingburg is to share and or replicate services that are working and effective for students. Additional resources, Healthy Alliance, and these are all since November, since I came aboard, but a lot of the groundwork was laid prior to my coming aboard with the team that was in place. Healthy Alliance is a mental health referral platform. It will most likely be a referral platform for New York State moving forward. This is a free service. Students, the Healthy Alliance staff reaches out to families. Their information is put into their central database called Unite Us. And from that, students are referred to, they're matched to services in the community. And Healthy Alliance keeps a robust, updated community service list. So names of directors, they change frequently. Programs change, programs close, and new programs open. So this is a relationship that we're really excited about. We're meeting with them on Monday for this Monday for a transition meeting, and we're going to be doing training for our staff, for our pupil personnel staff. Lansingburg is already implementing this, but again, we're trying to coordinate how specific we're using them. We could see using Healthy Alliance potentially as our vehicle for all referrals to outside agencies. It allows us to track them. It also allows us to determine if they've actually received the service. So that's a great resource we have. State Ed we're partnering with. We meet with State Ed, Office of Mental Health, Rockport Research BRI, every Thursday each week. They really provide a great deal of service from guidance, suggestions, how to manage the SAMHSA grant, suggestions for screeners, and also we're accessing resources. The Office of Mental Health will be providing professional development training for our staff. And lastly, St. Catherine's is specific to Lansingburg. They have family engagement specialists, but both St. Peter's and the community hospice are resources that we access when needed. They're very specific to when we need those. So these are all the partnerships we currently have. Amy talked about the MTSS model, very similar tiered model of public health. This is the foundation of the Project Aware grant and the mental health grant. It starts with the foundation of staff wellness, professional development, family, school, community partnerships. All of these we are currently working on developing and expanding. It has to be systemic, it has to be collaborative, equitable, and sustainable. And you can see this motion, the circular motion of building awareness, all the way to the evidence-based information, referrals, and providing guided support. Evidence-based interventions is critically important, so we're always looking for evidence-based, so that when we collect data, the data is usable and it's also a grant requirement. With the addition of Ryan and Susan, both have very lengthy social emotional learning backgrounds. Susan Alvian, our mental health trainer, is currently working with the Teacher Center and providing professional development for social emotional learning. She was also a teacher for 15 years. We're looking at embedding social emotional learning into the foundational approach to what is done every day in a classroom setting. The research on social emotional learning for students shows that those who participate in evidence-based social emotional learning programs demonstrate the increased academic achievement, increased development of social emotional skills, improved attitude, improve positive social behaviors, and decrease conduct problems and emotional distress. Those are all things I think that we would support and want to see with our students, and a lot of the activities that are happening in school that bring students joy and help them smile and laugh are all components of that, but teaching the foundational concepts in the classroom setting and reinforcing those is critically important. And on the same token, it's important that teachers are healthy. There's a lot of energy that goes into teaching every day, as everyone knows. It can be tiring and exhausting, but small gains are important. And evidence-based research shows that social emotional learning programs implemented to support students show reduction in teacher stress, lower anxiety and depression, and you can see the other benefits to that. So we're going to be implementing social emotional learning, foundational approaches. And here's another way to look at our tiered programming support. I've talked about Healthy Alliance, START, Pride Center, St. Anne's and Rensselaer County Department of Mental Health. What we're currently implementing is Too Good for Drugs, Too Good for Violence, an evidence-based substance abuse, substance use, and violence prevention program. The PACS Good Behavior Game, which is an evidence-based classified intervention grades K through 5. Positive Action Middle School, for middle school, evidence-based social emotional learning curriculum grades 6 through 8. And then social media and digital citizenship. Really created, the curriculum was created by Chris Johnson. It's not evidence-based, but we're implementing that. Chris really calls it a digital awareness program. We're looking to replicate both the PACS and the social media programs in Lansingburg. So again, we're sharing ideas, we're borrowing from each other, and looking at what best practices are. So this coordination with the grant, I mentioned Joe Otter, just to give you an idea of what we've done. December 6th, we met with their entire administrative team, their superintendent, extremely supportive and excited about the program. We met with the pupil personnel team and did a presentation on Project Aware, and we're listening and getting ideas and hearing from Lansingburg what their needs are. We hired Ryan, we hired Susan, you can see a little bit of their backgrounds there. We'll be interviewing on Friday for a behavioral specialist, similar to Mary Fran Jerome's position here. And our goal is to identify current mental health support programs and community partnerships, assess needs, gaps in this tiers of where we need to support students, identifying resources, expanding partnerships, developing procedures and policies. Lansingburg, similarly, you can see I spoke about the Lansingburg programs. So again, we're going to try to partner and mirror what they're doing, and ideally any programs that we have moving forward will be programs that we can either share resources between the two schools or share the same similar programs in both of the schools. Our progress to date with the Project Aware program, we're going to be identifying the universal screener, and that should be completed by the end of January. Then we're going to select a certain percentage of our students in year 1 to screen, and from those students we're going to be making referrals out at the tier 3 level to our community partners. We've drafted a suicide policy that is a grant requirement. To draft it, it's been kind of going through some revisions prior to going to Joe and the superintendent of Lansingburg, and then eventually that will go to the boards for approval. We have the St. Anne's program, as I mentioned, that we've already implemented, and we just began in January. We provided sponsored the drug impairment training for educational professionals on January 10th. We had 18 representatives from both schools attend. That was delivered by the state police, and we also partnered with Quest Arbosies to arrange that one. We're looking at training teachers in the PACS Good Behavior Game. New teachers or teachers that have never had the training or would like a refresher. Again, we're looking to mirror that same program on a trial basis in Lansingburg. Youth mental health training, there's a requirement that we train 95% of the staff members in Lansingburg by November 2024. It's a little bit of a challenge logistically, as you probably can imagine. It's an 8-hour training. We're going to start by training 4 or 5 of our staff members, including Ryan and Susan. Also, Pride Center, one of our partners, we're going to train a couple of members of the Pride staff so they can deliver this training. I mentioned Healthy Alliance. Pride Center, I mentioned. The Youth Resiliency Toolkit is an area of focus. And lastly, a needs assessment. We'll eventually be getting a needs assessment tool, and we're going to determine climate, culture, and the needs of both school districts, and then we're going to plan out from there. So really the goal of the program and all of what we're doing is support the whole child, remove barriers to access, to instill hope, build resiliency, and then create pathways to success for students. So looking ahead, most of this I touched upon, but coordination between the two schools, expanding student, teacher, community access to mental health and mental health trainings. We're looking to implement a summer, we're calling a Summer Teacher Parent Student Institute, where we offer a menu of options for teachers for professional development specific to the grant. Example, suicide training, youth mental health training, social emotional learning foundations, things of that nature. And we're trying to look at where we can find a day or two for students to come in. We want to bring more students into the program, as well as a parent component that focuses on parenting skills, but also awareness. The Youth Resiliency Toolkit, the suicide policy that I spoke about, universal screener that I spoke about, developing social-emotional competencies that become part of what we do every day in the classroom setting, and then ensuring sustainability by the end of the grant. So as we said too, we've done a couple of presentations similar to this. We've said, really to everyone, thank you for your partnership, because anyone that's listening to this presentation or involved, our community partners are incredibly eager and anxious to partner with us. Not because there's money in the grant. In many cases, they're looking for ways they can access money to help support us. It's really this community of professionals who are really just, 100% motivated to helping students and families in Rensselaer County. It's been really enjoyed my experience here so far in 2 months. I couldn't be more welcoming, and I'm really thrilled to be here. So that's a Project Aware presentation, and I don't know if there's any questions. It's a lot of information for one shot.
Well, Jan, I don't know how anyone can watch that and not be excited about the next 4.5 years. Just saying.
I wish you good luck with everything that you presented. It's a lot
It's
to
a lot.
take in, yeah. But it's exciting to hear about it, so thank you for sharing.
You're welcome, and it's a great team. So it's great, all the names that you saw there and all the team that are working here, it's a great team. So complete team effort, and we're excited about it and what the possibilities are.
Just to be clear, he's been here just over 2 months. Just hit the ground running.
All right, thank you.
I'm just gonna add one other thing, because I'd be remiss not to say it, but all of those pages of community partners and some of the contracts that we have, I just do want to shout out to the business office, because Megan's scrutinizing 1,000,001 contracts and getting all of those behind, like.
Megan scrutinizing contracts?
Well, and it's just, it's so many things, and I know Stephen around the budgeting, is like every single piece of this has required an extraordinary amount of work from the business office too. Like, we're getting the fun end of like doing the work with the providers, and their part of it has been a lot. Very, very heavy lifting.
More in the back of the house, but yeah, it's been intense. Stephen Gacci has played a major role in securing this Project Aware grant. So thank you for that shout out.
I hope we don't overwhelm the referrals the people that are receiving the referrals that we are sending, that's all. That's, I could go on forever about it, right? There's just a lack of people everywhere, and there's so many services needed, and there's just not enough professionals to go around. So that's what I'm thinking the whole time you're talking about all of this. I'm like, boy, I wish you success, but I can just see the barriers you're gonna run into. So good luck to you and I.
Thank you, and that's a Rensselaer County. It's all over. It's not just Rensselaer County, but we were part of many of us part of a team, a systems of care team. We met and we've discussed these. So everyone's advocating for more, but hopefully not. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The rest of them all messed.
Sorry.
All right, RTA. Okay.
I think the only in-classroom really update we had was kind of what you already heard before from my classroom. So a couple weeks ago, we had Erwin Forley, the Holocaust survivor, Zoom in with the class. It's my senior class humanitarian crises. So we've been focusing a lot on genocide, why people do the things that they do. And they expressed an interest in hearing from a Holocaust survivor. So I reached out and we were able to get one. Erwin is 96 years old, and he shared his story from being sent to the ghetto, being in Auschwitz, and what liberation was like afterwards. And as Joe expressed, the interest the students had while they were watching was very, very powerful to see how much they were taking away from it, and the conversations we had in the classroom after. They wrote thank you notes to him. It was very moving.
It's wonderful. I can't wait to watch what you're gonna share.
Yeah.
It was really great.
My turn?
Yeah, do you have anything?
I just want to say thanks to everybody, all the positive stuff from every direction makes it feel like a wonderful team, and everybody needs to see it that way. I also want to let everybody know that moving forward, at least for the next few months, as we're pushing through policy, the board will be holding a work session also each month. That will not be a board meeting and will not have any motions or any decisions made, but we need to work through some policies, so we'll be setting other meetings through the month. So when you see those, that's what that will be for.
Thank you, Joe.
All right, invitations to visitors to address the Board of Education, if we have any.
You were
Say
gonna dance
anything?
and everything, you said.
CYO was on a break, I was just coming up there. That was my daughter's plan.
Oh, hopefully they're having a good game down there. All right. So you'll notice that new business seems to be mostly a lot of the things that we pass each month, but then we do have a lot of motions for policies that, as Joe mentioned, the board is going to be taking some extra time to take a look at some of those. We do have second readings of ones and first readings of many of them tonight. If no one has any questions about the remainder of the agenda, I would like to remove the remainder of the agenda. Mark and Jim, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Adjournment, motion to adjourn? Lark and Stacy, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight.
I did kind of.
You always forget. I always do. I don't know why is that.